All right, week 2 of the college football season is coming up this weekend, and we got some really good games, including Oregon going on the road to take on Ohio State, Pittsburgh on the road to take on Tennessee, and a really interesting game, I think, Texas on the road in Fayetteville to take on the Arkansas Razorbacks. So some really good non-con games to talk about this week. Those are a few of them. We got some conference games, all kinds of stuff to talk about with this week's games. In today's video, I'm going to talk about some of these games and give you a pick and a prediction against the spread, and we have a super fan here to help us. Let's go. Well, good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, and guess what? I'm live for you on LouTube today, so thanks for watching. I really appreciate it also, and in addition to that as well. Hey, subscribe to this channel if you're not already. Did you know I post college football videos almost every single day of the year? It's true, some of them are even watchable. You can let me know about this one at the end. Also, let me know if you think I got some of these picks wrong. Now, any numbers that I talk about in today's video in terms of odds, point spreads, money lines, over-unders, anything like that, just like it has forever, is going to come from betnow.eu. That's just a site I've been using for years. I'm comfortable with it, and I'm familiar with it. So if any of you guys want to bet some money on college football games this year, check out betnow.eu. But up first, I want to talk about this Pittsburgh at Tennessee game. Now, this is an ACC team going on the road to take on an SEC team, and the road ACC team is actually favored over the home SEC team, not something you see all that often. Now, Tennessee had a big win in week 1, and by big, I mean the margin was big. They won, was it 38-6? I believe was the score over Bowling Green. Now, Bowling Green is one of the worst FBS teams in America. They were winless last year, and they lost every game they played by 30 points or more. So, Tennessee beating them 38-6. Listen, when you're Tennessee, that's a good win. I mean, I'm not going to knock a 38-6 win, right? I mean, we've seen Tennessee lose to some group of 5 teams over the last few years. They've really struggled with the coaching changes, a lot of transfers, things like that. They started quarterback Joe Milton. Now, I didn't think he played all that well, I'm just going to be honest, but I wasn't a fan of Joe Milton last year when he was at Michigan either. And to be honest, Michigan wasn't a fan of Joe Milton either because they benched him, and that's why he transferred out to Tennessee. I've talked to a lot of Tennessee fans this week, and not too many of them were happy with what they saw from Joe Milton either. And a lot of them are clamoring for Harrison Bailey, a very highly recruited quarterback out of the state of Georgia. He's currently in his second year in Knoxville. We'll see if you get to see any Harrison Bailey this week or not. Now, Pitt won last week, big too, 51-7. Pittsburgh's got a good defense, particularly a good defensive line. I think they're going to be able to get some pressure on Joe Milton, so we'll see how he reacts to that. Now, a lot of people are picking Pitt to win this game, and they're a 3-point favorite, like I mentioned. My head is telling me to pick Pitt in this game, and in fact, all week long when people have asked me about it, I've said, yeah, I think Pitt wins the game. My heart wants to see Tennessee get a win. I think this program needs this win. When you look at Tennessee's schedule, it gets really, really tough here in a couple of weeks with games against Florida, Alabama, Georgia down the road. I believe they play Ole Miss from the West this year, who has a ridiculous offense. They're going to score a lot of points on almost everybody they play. So if you're a Tennessee fan and you're looking down the road to possible bowl eligibility, which I think should be the goal for Tennessee this year, any goal above that I think is ridiculous. And fan expectations versus reality are probably further apart at Tennessee than almost any other school. The reality is Tennessee making a bowl game this year would be a good season. Coaches love making bowl games if for no other reason than you get 2 extra weeks of practice at the end of the year. I think Tennessee needs to probably win this game in order to become bowl eligible later on in the season. If they can't beat Pitt, then I'm worried that there's not enough teams left on their schedule that they can beat to get to that 6 wins. With that being said, in honor of my buddy BVD, who's been battling some serious health issues over the last couple of months, I'm going to grin and bear it and pick Tennessee. Give me the 3 points. All right, 3:30 over on ESPN2. Yeah, we've got UAB on the road at my Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia's a 24.5-point home favorite in this one. Of course, Georgia had to win last week over Clemson. And while anybody with any football sense at all realizes what a great win that was, the Trolls are out in full force this week with the whole, Georgia's going 1-12. Georgia has no offense. I I don't understand what people don't understand. Georgia's top 4 pass catchers were out in that game against Clemson. We were missing 2 offensive linemen and a starting safety, and we beat a top 5 team. You're not going to get any complaints from me under those circumstances anytime ever. Would I like to have seen JT Daniels come out and sling the ball around for 200 or 300 yards? Of course I would. Am I worried that he can't do it? No, I've seen him do it. In the 4 or 5 games he played last year, he threw the ball all over the place against every single team we played. So I'm not concerned. I don't have any worry that he can't do it. He didn't have anybody to throw the ball to. That's just the reality of the situation. We were throwing the ball to freshmen and redshirt freshmen. Our 2 leading receivers was a freshman tight end and a redshirt freshman wide receiver, Lad McConkey. We're going to start to get some of those receivers back. We'll see if any of them come back this week against UAB or if they sit them out another week and wait for the SEC play to start the following week against South Carolina. News also out this week. JT Daniels has an oblique issue, they're calling it. Not really calling it an injury, but he's got some sort of issue with his oblique. He missed practice on Monday, and backup quarterback Carson Beck actually took all the first-team reps for Georgia on Monday. Now, JT came back and practiced on Tuesday and Wednesday. Today, of course, is Thursday. We'll see if we get any updates today. I don't really think it matters who plays quarterback in this game in terms of who's going to win. I think Georgia's going to win the game. Will they cover the 24.5? We'll see. I think some of that depends on who plays quarterback and if we get any of those receivers back. I would like to see Georgia throw the ball this week, regardless of whether those receivers come back or not. It would be nice to know that if those receivers were to happen to go down again, we still have some options down the field. When you look at Georgia's schedule, it sets up pretty good. They've got a difficult game against Florida, Auburn, maybe the Mizzou or the Kentucky game. But generally speaking, Georgia's hardest game of the season is behind them, and they won minus a lot of players. Got to start getting some of those players back. However, Georgia's not going to go where they ultimately want to go, which is a national championship, with the offense that we saw last Saturday. Now, I understand why we ran the offense that we did, and I'm not complaining, but I would like to see Georgia sling the ball around. I don't know who's going to start at quarterback, whether they're going to let JT play or whether they're going to rest him. I have confidence in Carson Beck as his second year in the system. He was a highly rated quarterback coming out of high school, came to Athens last year, played a little bit in mop-up duty, mostly just handing the ball off. So it would be nice to see him play in a game where he can sling the ball around and run the actual offense. 24.5 is a lot of points to lay. UAB is a pretty good team, and they're very well coached. I like Bill Clark. Now, there's a huge talent gap in this game between Georgia and UAB, and you see that reflected in the line. With all the injuries Georgia has, and with now questions about whether or not JT Daniels is going to play, I don't know if I can lay the 24.5 points here. If Carson Beck makes his first ever start, I just don't know how it's going to go. Georgia could win this game by, 5 touchdowns. Georgia could win this game by 35. If all those players are still out and JT is out and we decide to go with a slow-it-down ground game on Saturday, I could see Georgia winning this game by 17-21. I don't think I can take Georgia in this game and lay the 24.5. There's certain teams in college football that I feel comfortable laying huge numbers with, and there's certain teams that I never feel comfortable laying huge numbers with. And even though I'm a Georgia fan, I'm never comfortable laying a huge number with Georgia. Kirby likes to play very conservative in the second half of games when he has any lead at all, never mind a huge lead. A lot of handoffs, a lot of waiting until the play clock is under 5 seconds to snap the ball, and really no throwing in the second half of blowouts, especially if they end up putting the backup quarterback in. At least that's been sort of his philosophy in the past, which makes it very difficult for me to lay a lot of points with UGA. Other teams, Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Cincinnati, there are certain teams that seem to cover when they have huge point spreads, and there are certain teams that don't. I'd love to take Georgia in this game. I am a Georgia fan. I don't usually bet Georgia games at all, and I never under any circumstances bet against Georgia. So I won't be betting this game this week, but I would take UAB in the 24.5 points if you do want to bet it. Now, here's a good one. Iowa on the road at Iowa State. Now, both these teams are 1-0, but how they got to 1-0 couldn't be more different. Iowa had one of the more impressive wins in week 1 when they absolutely destroyed Indiana. And Indiana was one of the most hyped up teams of the offseason. Indiana North Carolina, Arizona State to a lesser degree, Kentucky and Mizzou to a lesser degree. Indiana had a pretty good year last year, 6-2. They had 17 starters coming back, including their quarterback, Michael Penix, who is really, really good. They had a really good running game. And they got blown out by Iowa. The game was not competitive, and it was not close. Now, Iowa was known for playing pretty good defense, but not really having a great offense. And they showed in this game against Indiana last week that the offense is ready to go this year. Iowa State, on the other hand, much higher ranked in the preseason than Iowa. A lot of expectations after having a really great year last year. Head coach Matt Campbell returns, as well as a lot of pieces on offense and defense from a really good team last year. And they came out and really struggled last week against Northern Illinois. I hate to overreact or jump to conclusions based off any games in week one, and I'm trying not to do that here with these two games, Iowa and Iowa State. I think Iowa State is better than the team we saw last week struggle with Northern Illinois. Iowa, I think they really are as good as what we saw them play against Indiana. Matt Campbell has never beaten Iowa. I think that's accurate. I've read a lot on this game this week. It's one of the bigger games of the week, and I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere that as much success as Matt Campbell has had at Iowa State, and he's one of the hottest names in coaching right now, as much success as he's had there, he's yet to beat Iowa. This is a home game for Iowa State. Iowa State's a 4.5-point favorite. I'm going to take the underdog. In fact, this is one I would consider playing on the money line. You might not even need the 4.5 points. I think Iowa could win this game outright. Give me Iowa and the 4.5 points. All right, what about App State on the road at Miami? Now, of course, Miami got absolutely abused last weekend in Atlanta in a kickoff classic game against Alabama. Now, to Miami's credit, Alabama has and is going to beat a lot of teams by 30 and 40 points, including some good teams. Go back and look at last year's national title game, right? They actually beat Ohio State in the national title game last year, worse than they beat Miami this year. I'm not saying that to compare last year's Alabama team to this year's. I'm saying that to say that you can be a really good team and still get blown out by Alabama. And I do think Miami is a really good team. I think I had Miami pegged to go 10-2 in the preseason. Nothing that happened to them against Alabama last week has caused me to change my mind. When you look at Miami's schedule, I think they still have the ability to finish with 10 wins. The question about Miami now is how do they respond to this Alabama game between the years mentally? Do they let this game demoralize them? Do they let the Alabama game cost them the App State game? They're a 9-point home favorite. App State is traditionally one of the better group of five teams. They're not currently on the level of a Cincinnati or even a Central Florida, probably, but they're a really good team. Not great, but good, well coached. And they always seem to play these games pretty close. Well, not always. That would be a lie. They've gotten blown out a few times. I think this could be a close game. I'm gonna be a buyer on Miami, though. I'm gonna bet on the fact that Miami rebounds this week. That Manny Diaz keeps the team together, doesn't allow them to spend too much time focusing on what happened last week, and starts to get them prepared for what they need to do this week and the rest of the weeks during the regular season so that Miami can finish with the season that I think they can have. I'm going to take the home team here, Miami, and lay the 9 points. All right, 7:30 over on the SEC Network. We've got Missouri going on the road to take on Kentucky. Kentucky's a 5.5-point home favorite. And don't look now, but Kentucky has discovered the forward pass. That's right, last week Kentucky threw the ball down the field for the first time since the iPhone 3 was out. And they looked pretty good doing it. They've got a new quarterback and a new offensive coordinator. And Kentucky fans have been saying all offseason that they were going to have a much improved offense in 2021 and that they were indeed going to throw the ball down the field and stretch the field and not just do the run, and the 2- and 3-yard passes that they seem to have been stuck doing the past 2 or 3 years. And I will admit, Kentucky did look good in week 1. Now it was against a terrible team. Mizzou, on the other hand, they won but did not look good at all. Now, this is an interesting matchup to me for a couple of reasons. It's hard to differentiate, in my mind, between the second, third, and fourth best teams in the SEC East. I think everybody has Georgia pegged to win the SEC East. That doesn't mean they will. I'm just talking about general consensus here. Almost everyone agrees that Georgia is the favorite to win the East. It's hard to find people to agree on who they think is second, third, or fourth, but it's always a combination of these two teams here, Missouri, Kentucky, and, of course, Florida. Now, I picked Missouri to finish second in the East this season, and I have to admit, again, that after I saw, from what I saw from them in week 1, it's not looking like a very good pick. But again, whether a team played really, really good or really, really bad in week 1, I'm trying not to overreact to that. There was a lot of weird things that happened. There was a lot of weird football, and I could list a dozen of them that I saw in week 1 that didn't seem to make much sense. And the biggest improvement usually comes between week 1 and week 2. If Missouri comes out this week and lays another egg, then it's time for Uncle Lou to admit he was wrong about Missouri being the second best team in the East. They're a 5.5-point underdog on the road at Kentucky. Also, if Kentucky comes out this week and throws for another 200 or 250 yards, well, then that's something else that Uncle Lou's going to have to go ahead and admit he was wrong about, and it looks like Kentucky does indeed, or will indeed, have a much improved offense. We'll see. Since I wrote it all summer long, I'm going to stick with it at least one more week. Give me Mizzou, and I'm not happy about this either, or very confident in it. Give me Mizzou and the 5.5 points. Well, here's a game that seems a lot less interesting now than it did in the preseason. Washington on the road at Michigan, 8 o'clock on ABC. Michigan is a 7-point home favorite. Washington had probably the most disappointing loss in week 1, in my opinion, in all of college football. You had some embarrassing losses, Georgia Tech losing to Northern Illinois, North Carolina getting blown out, and Sam Howell playing really bad against Virginia Tech. Washington was a pretty good team. They were preseason ranked in most polls. Some people had them picked to win the Pac-12 North. If you didn't have them picked to win the Pac-12 North, you had them picked to finish second. And they came out and lost in week 1 to something called Montana, and they did not look good doing it. I definitely think Michigan wins this game at home. This is a long way for Washington to travel, a place they're not used to playing. And regardless of what we all think about Jim Harbaugh and whether we think he's great or whether we think he's terrible or something in between, Michigan does have a huge talent advantage over Washington, and Michigan looked pretty good in week 1. I definitely think Michigan wins the game. Can they win by more than 7? They're a 7-point favorite. I'm going to say they can. I think Michigan's defense is going to shut Washington down. I think Washington's going to have a hard time moving the ball in this game, never mind scoring points. And I think Michigan's offense can have enough success and score enough points to help Michigan to cover this spread. Give me the Wolverines, lay to 7 points. How about a holy war on Saturday night? Yeah, 10:15 over on ESPN. You have 21-ranked Utah on the road at BYU, and Utah's a 7-point road favorite in this one. Now, most people understood that BYU wasn't going to be nearly good in 2021 as they were in 2020 for a variety of reasons, most notably that quarterback gone off to the NFL, but they lost a lot off of last year's team. Utah, consistently a pretty good team from the Pac-12 South, one of these teams that struggles to get elite talent, but the coaching is always able to get the absolute most out of whatever talent it is they have. This is a rivalry game. This is a bitter rivalry game. If you don't follow this rivalry, it really is called the Holy War. If you know me, I never pick BYU. I can't stand BYU. There's no circumstances on planet Earth in which I would ever lay a dime on BYU, and I'm not doing it now. Give me Utah, lay to 7 points. I hope they win by 40. Now, here's one that might be one of the biggest mismatches, at least in terms of Power 5 versus Power 5. Stanford on the road at Southern Cal. Southern Cal is ranked 14th and a 17-point favorite. This one comes on 10:30 over on Fox, or it might be FS1. It's one of the two. Anyway, doesn't matter. No one watches Pac-12. That's what y'all tell me all the time. I'm going to watch this one, though. Southern Cal's a really good team. I thought all offseason they were going to be a really good team. They looked really good in week 1. I really like their quarterback and wide receiver situations. The defense seems to be a little bit better than what it was last year. They got a good running back. Stanford, on the other hand, is an absolute disaster. I don't know what has happened to Stanford over the last few years. David Shaw has been one of my favorite coaches in college football for a long, long time, and I often referred to Stanford as an SEC team on the West Coast because of the style of football they like to play for so long under David Shaw. Big offensive lines, great running backs, slow the game down, ground and pound, high percentage short passes. They've gone completely away from that over the last couple of years, and now they're spreading it out and throwing it around all over the place, and it's just not working. The tree was absolutely terrible last year, Stanford I'm talking about, and they did not look good at all in week 1. I think Southern Cal could be the best team in the Pac-12. We'll see how Oregon looks this week against Ohio State. We need to keep our eye on UCLA, who to me has been very impressive through their first 2 games, including the big win over LSU. How big is that game going to be at the end of the year, the Southern Cal UCLA game, if they somehow both remain undefeated? That would be the biggest Pac-12 game we've seen in a long time. Southern Cal's at home, huge talent advantage in this game. They're a better team. They've got a better quarterback. They've got better playmakers. I trust their defense more than I trust Stanford. And even though I'm not a huge Clay Helton fan, I'm going to bite the bullet here. Stanford's just that bad. Give me Southern Cal, lay the 17. The tree is absolutely terrible. Okay, now we got 4 games left that I wanted to talk about on today's video. We have Texas at Arkansas, which I think is probably the most interesting game of the week. We have Oregon at Ohio State, which is the matchup involving the 2 highest-ranked teams that we have all week. We have South Carolina, who started the week as an underdog on the road at East Carolina. They're now a 2-point favorite, but South Carolina at East Carolina. And we have Jacksonville State on the road at Florida State. And this one could end up being an interesting... Oh, my God. No. I am White Tanto! You ready to pick some games?
White Tanto say, picking games, a lot like picking woman. 50-50 chance you end up screwing yourself.
Okay. Whatever that means. Okay, here we go. All right, Tonto, what first we have one of, if not the biggest games of the week. This one comes on early at noon. The Oregon Ducks go on the road to Columbus, Ohio to take on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State's a 14.5-point home favorite in this one. Both teams are 1-0. Oregon kind of struggled and didn't look great in a 1-touchdown win against Fresno State last week. Ohio State, on the other hand, went on the road and beat Big Ten opponent Minnesota by 14. Who you got in this one?
White Tanto say, Oregon Trail. Much, much easier than Trail of Tears. White Tanto! Take Ohio State. Lay the point.
All right, Tonto, an old rivalry here. We have Texas at Arkansas. These two teams used to be in the same conference and play every single year. They're rekindling the matchup this year in 2021. Texas is 1-0. Arkansas is 1-0. Now, there's a lot of people who spent the offseason telling me, Tonto, that Texas was going to start 0-2 with losses to Louisiana and Arkansas. Texas looked pretty good and blew out Louisiana last week. Arkansas was losing at halftime to Rice, but ended up winning the game. Arkansas, 7-point home underdog. Who you got in this one?
White Tanto say, Texas is a state best known for losing a battle. And even though White Tanto, no remember what I ate for breakfast, White Tanto, remember the Alamo. Arkansas is like Dan Mullen's wife's wedding vows. They don't matter. White Tonto! Take Shorthorn! Lay the point!
All right, Tonto, another one you've been waiting for. Your Florida State Seminoles. Now, Florida State lost last week, but only by 3 and in overtime to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was a pretty big favorite. It's been a long time since Florida State has played a game that good, in my opinion. They looked pretty good. Of course, Mackenzie Milton ended up coming in the second half when the other quarterback had to go out when his helmet popped off, and that was a good story. We hadn't seen Mackenzie Milton play in a couple of years, and he did okay. He was something like 5 of 7 for about 50 yards and led Florida State back in the fourth quarter of that game, eventually tying Notre Dame up and forcing overtime before Notre Dame won 41-38. There's not really a line on this game, but give us your thoughts.
White Tonto say, Florida State 3-point loss to Rudy. Biggest moral victory in history of Clown College. White Tonto! Take Seminole. Win big.